I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, we now have a suspected motive behind those arson attacks on ballot drop boxes, and shock of the century, I was right. Plus, hundreds of ballots failed to get to their destination in eastern Washington. We once again are going to remind voters of what they need to do to make sure their ballot has been counted. And just for fun, we'll give you some hints to guess on what our political-themed Halloween costumes will be on the show tomorrow. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Appreciate every single one of you. Man, the days are ticking down till Election Day. We have a lot to talk about related to the election. Want to reiterate our ask that you all check on the status of your ballots, especially considering some of these stories that we're going to outline right now. So first, when I'm right, I'm right, It's a little pat on my back, No, I'm not happy about it. It's just like, this is my first rodeo, people. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been covering the far left in the Pacific Northwest for 15 years. We know their tactics. And frankly, they talk about what they're going to do before they do it. So I had said that as soon as I saw the ballot drop box on fire in Vancouver, Washington, I said far left terrorism. And maybe it was a jump to conclusion based on 15 years of knowing these people and their tactics very well. And there was this pile on Brandi. This is irresponsible and all this, which fine, maybe it is irresponsible. But in the heat of the moment, I tweeted it out anyway, and I knew I was right, and I was right. So the New York Times was the first to report this yesterday, saying that the devices that were dropped into the ballot drop box in Vancouver and in Portland were emblazoned with the message, "Free Gaza." Gee. Yeah, when you're right, you're right. I'll step off my high horse for a second. But it was just, people are so triggered in Seattle, like, how dare you? You know this is probably MAGA, and this is a blue area with blue voters and stuff. No, it doesn't matter. These people have put out posters, basically, like a couple years ago, they put out a poster with a ballot drop box on fire. Antifa did. And it was like, their whole thing is like, oh, no peace, no nothing, no normalcy unless we get what we want. So they don't care if it's a blue ballot or a red ballot. So from the New York Times, police, this is funny though, from the Times, police say they had not determined a motive for the arson fires in Portland, Oregon, or Vancouver, Washington, but the messages have heightened the sensitivity of the investigation. Yeah, chances are that Free Gaza is the motive. And I'm sure the left is going to say, well, this could have been MAGA, dumping them in there and blaming. No, you think they would have written Free Gaza? No, they probably would have written like, yay Donald Trump or F Donald Trump or something to like F Donald Trump to like mix it up. Free Gaza. It's the Free Gaza people. In fact, somebody was sharing a bulletin where it was like about, no one votes until Gaza's free or something like that. So let's get a life. I knew this was the case. It said investigators responding to arson fires at 2 ballot boxes in the Pacific Northwest this week found devices at both scenes marked with the words "Free Gaza," according to 2 law enforcement officials. Investigators are trying to determine if the perpetrator was actually a pro-Palestinian activist or someone using that prominent cause to sow discord, one of the officials said, speaking on the condition of anonymity because the investigation was ongoing. But the message has added a heightened layer of political sensitivity to a closely watched investigation in the final days of a tense presidential election. Well, there was already, when somebody lights a ballot drop box on fire, there's always going to be a heightened layer of political sensitivity, regardless of what their motive is. And had I been wrong, had it been a MAGA type person, yeah, I would have come on the show and been like, well, my bad, that was a really irresponsible tweet. And maybe it was still an irresponsible tweet before we knew. I just felt very confident, and I was right, and I am going to be right. This isn't some right-winger pretending Free Gaza. That's not the message they would put on there. Get a grip. But one other thing I was right about, I hate to say it. No, I don't. So I put this out. The tweet I had put out right after the video came out said, this is far left terrorism. This is what it looks like when you let Antifa run wild in the Pacific Northwest for 10 years and act like they don't exist. This is what we're voting against. And then I followed that up and said, if this does turn out to be a Democrat, Seattle media will bury it in 24 hours. If it's a Republican, it'll lead the newscast every day until Election Day, which I think is just true. And Jim Brunner, who's a reporter, political reporter at the Times, had responded to me and said, I don't know, maybe wait for more facts. All right, so now we have some information. You know, the fact is that these incendiary devices said Free Gaza on them. So I imagine that, you know, since the Times was just waiting for facts to report on, that this would be like front page on the Seattle Times right now. No, the front page on the Seattle Times right now is a big fat picture of big old meatballs, and it's about two buzzy new Seattle Italian restaurants. Nowhere on the front page when I checked about an hour ago was there any mention of this update or the story in general that's unfolding with the two ballot drop boxes. Nothing about the free Gaza or anything like that. And do you think for 1 second, if those incendiary devices had said like MAGA, you're like something like that, that if they had pointed to a right-wing culprit, that wouldn't be the picture on the front page of the Times instead of a plate of spaghetti and meatballs? Talking about two buzzy new Italian restaurants, which, what a dumb story days out from an election. You have nothing else to have on the front page of the Seattle Times than a story about two buzzy new Italian restaurants? Give me a break. Yeah, this would be 100%. They would not wait for their own sources to confirm. They would quote the New York Times, and they would say the New York Times is reporting based on two law enforcement sources that these were, MAGA messaging or something on them, and it's suspected to be right-wing extremists. Not a question in my mind. I don't care how many people tell me I'm wrong on social media. I absolutely know that I'm right on this one. It would be the lead on every newscast. It would be front page on every newspaper across the state. And that's just the truth of the situation that we're in. But it's free Gaza, so we'll just ignore that. Or we're waiting for ample evidence that it's not some right-wingers pretending to be pro-Palestine to sow discord. Give me a break. All right, off the high horse. A couple but really troubling stories when it comes to ballots not getting, and we have a couple just from friends who told us. We have a friend who told us that she turned in her and her husband's ballots at the same time. They went and tracked them. His ballot was received. Hers is like nowhere to be found.
Nope, she had to go get a new one.
Had to go get a new one, turned them in together. So this is from the Moscow Pullman Daily News, although it's being reported pretty widely at this point. Hundreds of Whitman County ballots were lost in the USPS system. The Washington State U.S. Postal Service Administration is investigating where the ballots went. They never reached voters. It says Sandy Jamison, the Whitcomb County auditor, announced in a news release Tuesday it was brought to her attention that several Whitcomb County constituents never received ballots for the November 5th general election. Jamison estimates 250 ballots, primarily voters with P.O. boxes in the town of Garfield, went missing after being processed by the Postal Service. The news release verified that all Whitcomb County ballots were sent out October 16th. The main Spokane post office received and marked the ballots successfully scanned, but the problem lies after that step in the process. So the ballots went out. They got to the main post office in Spokane. They were successfully scanned in as part of the tracking process, and then poof, they vanished. Never got to primarily the P.O. boxes that they were heading to. So clearly there's a USPS issue here, likely on the delivery end of things, or they were stolen, but I don't know. It seems like if there had been some widespread like theft or breaking into of P.O. boxes somewhere that it would have been reported. So it seems more likely that the carrier or whoever brought them from the Spokane destination to where they were supposed to go next, something happened there. So that's troubling because now we're just a few days out and there have been, now those voters are left with just days to like get their new ballot right and then make sure it gets to where it's going and it's counted by Tuesday. And 250 votes is a big deal. It is a big deal, especially we can say that. First of all, there's been a lot of elections that have been decided by less than that, but we just had the Commissioner of Public Lands race where the difference between second and third was, what was it, it was like a dozen or a couple dozen or something like that. It was double digits. And so this is a very red county. And so we want to make sure definitely that all 250 of those ballots get to where they're going. I'd feel the same way if they were Democrat ballots. But it's just concerning. And again, it shows this, the legitimacy of the concern of some conservatives who want to go back to in-person voting, that having this chain of custody issue leaves the possibility for all these problems. They don't have to be nefarious. It doesn't have to be with the intent of disrupting an election or, stopping someone from voting or stealing someone's vote or voting illegally. But there are more steps in the chain, more links in the chain to get from you casting your ballot to it being counted by the auditor. And yeah, that's every step that there is, every different hand that the ballot is in is another opportunity for it not to make it to where it's going. Meanwhile, 16 ballots in Bellevue made it to their destination. The question is, was the destination correct? This from King 5 News. Bellevue woman receives 16 ballots addressed to her apartment with different names. So at her apartment number, she gets, imagine opening up in your mailbox, you get 16 ballots and they're all to different people.
Yep.
But her address and her apartment number. King County Elections tells King 5 that they have daily calls with USPS, and they told King 5 they'd bring up the topic immediately. So this is the woman talking to King 5. Her name is Jamie Visaya. She rents a 2-bedroom apartment in Bellevue. She said, I was in complete shock. My son and I moved here on October 3rd. Visaya said she noticed the first batch of ballots in her mailbox on Friday. There were about 9 voter registration ballots that were not mine. They were addressed to other people, and so I thought that was strange. So I ended up returning them to the post office here. She said she turned them into the employee at USPS and said, can you please make sure these get to who they're going to? And he just said he had a process that the post office follows. She said she took the 9 ballots and did not give any. She said that the employee took the 9 ballots and did not give any further detail. A few days later, Vinsea said she opened her mailbox again and this time found 7 additional ballots with different unknown names. She said, again, they were all addressed to her building and her unit. So she'd already taken back 9. And then she gets 7 more with totally different names on them. She said it's all names of like Indian descent and possibly Middle Eastern descent, she told King 5 News. 16 ballots in 2 separate rounds, all with names she thought might be like Middle Eastern descent. Brings 9 back to the post office. Then she gets 7 more in the mail. How is that even possible unless you had somebody who lived there before her, who used that as an apartment, who used that address to get ballots for a whole bunch of different people who maybe didn't live in that apartment or didn't live in Bellevue or something like that, because there's nothing saying that.
She said she checked with the apartments and that was not the person that lived there before. And she said if it would have been, she obviously would have gotten other mail for those people, but she's never gotten any other
Right,
mail.
but it's also like, that 16 people weren't living in that apartment, right? So even if it had been one of the people who'd lived there and then maybe they were getting, all their family members were sending their ballots there for some unknown reason, but that clearly is not the case. So now you've got all these mystery freaking ballots sent in 2 batches to a single 2-bedroom apartment in Bellevue.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it strange, too, that the delivery person delivered them? I mean,
right.
If you had a stack of 9 ballots that is going to an apartment, wouldn't you be like, well, that's weird. I should double check.
Yeah.
Or I don't know.
I don't know if that's their responsibility to do, but it absolutely seems strange.
So wouldn't you?
All of that, I mean, I definitely have some questions, right? So, and I might maybe be like, is this voter fraud? What's going on here? Why are all these? It's like when all the ballots go to, 77 South Washington Street in Seattle. Mm-hmm. Where it's like the homeless shelter. And It's like, the homeless can register somewhere, and a lot of them just happen to register there. So all of that to say this, you have to, as soon as we're done today, votewa.gov. Votewa.gov. It is super, super simple to plug in a bit of information and to make sure that your ballot is counted. So you sign in with your first name, last name, date of birth. And then Nicole and I both did this, so we've both verified that my ballot has been received and accepted. Nicole's ballot has been received and accepted, so that's what it'll tell you. There's also other information on there you can get, like you can check your voting history, like what is my voting record? You can
also be real sneaky and snoopy about things, so don't do that.
What do you mean?
I mean, you can look at other people.
If you know their birth date.
Look at your stuff.
If you know their birth date.
It's not hard to figure out birth dates.
Well, I mean, if you want to be, I'm sure people do that to me all the time.
Yeah. Well, I wish that there was a passcode or something on it.
I don't know. It doesn't bother me because sometimes people will look and see if a celebrity voted.
Sure.
And they'll plug in their name and their birth date. I don't know. If people want to know that I voted, you can't go on there and see how they voted.
No, but you can see their address. That's what I'm saying. Their home address. That's creepy and weird.
It is creepy and weird. A lot of trolls online already know my home address because they talk to me about where I live on the internet all the time. Veiled threats, if you will. But you know what?
Oh, that's lovely.
I dare you. Try me.
Don't put that out into the small town universe.
Whatever. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it anyway. They have vicious guard dogs, and we're heavily armed. I don't know. I'll just say that. Okay, so with that in mind, a couple things we're going to do on the show today. You might have noticed there was no subscriber show poll before the show, and that's because we're going to do an in-show activity for subscribers. So we are going to, as we did last year, dress up on tomorrow's show because after all, it is Halloween. And as we did last year, I was a member of Antifa. Nicole was Sheeple. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be something politically related, specifically Washington politics. Something we've discussed on the show, etc. So we're going to be giving you some hints. So first of all, I don't know what Nicole's going to dress as, and she doesn't know what I'm going to dress as. We wrote down guesses for each other and put them in a little vase over here that we'll look at tomorrow. But for the first 10 subscribers on Patreon, Locals, and X, you've got to be subscribers who plug in a correct guess for either Nicole or I, the first 10, before the end of the day today, we are going to make sure that you get a free piece of our merch when we launch our new collection next year. So we'll keep your names, we'll keep your information, we'll get you your free piece of merch. So let's start with a hint. Again, I don't know either. Hint for Nicole's Halloween costume. Let's see it. Nicole's hint is, what is your hint?
It's someone making money hand over heart.
Hand over heart instead of hand over fist.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay. But it has to do with Washington politics and something that would have come up, something or someone that would have come up on the show.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I don't know, but I'm going to stew on that today.
Okay.
So if you have a guess for what you think Nicole's political costume is going to be tomorrow, and you're a subscriber on Patreon, I mean, any of you can guess, but the only ones who will get free merch if they guess correctly are subscribers on Patreon, Locals, and X. So make sure that you plug that in on one of those platforms. And we'll have my hint coming up after our next segment in the next block, because I don't want to overwhelm you with too much thought. So that's Nicole's hint, someone making money hand over heart. And we'll get to mine in a little bit. Another agency entity ringing alarm bells on the juvenile crime crisis, which is just completely out of control. And we know that. And it's like more and more people are just going to have to keep speaking up about it. And it's one of those things like with Washington elections. I'm like, what more has to happen for people to vote different? Like, what more has to happen with juvenile crime for people to wake up and say, hey, we can't coddle them and treat them all like 9-year-olds? So this comes from the Pierce County Police Chiefs Association. So like it sounds, the police chiefs that make up all the individual agencies in Pierce County. It says the Pierce County, it's just a statement, kind of open letter of sorts on the crime crisis. The Pierce County Police Chiefs Association represents the leadership of every law enforcement organization within Pierce County. Juvenile justice can be an uncomfortable topic to discuss, but our current environment demands that we have a conversation. Just as our officers and deputies respond to crimes committed by adults, so do we ask them to respond to crimes committed by juveniles. However, the system of accountability for adults who commit crimes is not being utilized for juveniles who commit those same crimes. This includes pretrial confinement for juveniles who commit acts of violence, including acts of domestic violence for which state law mandates arrest and confinement. The necessary protocols and facilities are presently available at Reman Hall. Unfortunately, police departments throughout the county are finding that even in cases involving domestic violence, juvenile offenders are not being accepted for pretrial detainment. Leadership from the Chiefs Association has met with decision makers within the juvenile justice system to no avail. Our officers and deputies cannot effectively serve our communities with this coordinated effort, and we continue to ask for improvement. So the chief of police for the city of Fife went on King 5 News and talked about why they sent out this letter, and it has to do with the situation his officers responded to last week.
And it's a little frustrating, obviously. When we take somebody into custody, we're not able to book them.
One example, Fisher says last week, Raymond Hall refused to admit a 17-year-old suspected of domestic violence crimes against his parents. He says Raymond Hall told officers it was only booking suspects facing felonies.
So our officers are trying to figure out what to do with the juvenile. And the recommendation is release them to a parent or another family member, which is, in my opinion, irresponsible. They just assaulted mom and dad. The place exists to hold juveniles that commit crimes, especially crimes of violence against other people, and it should be used.
Yeah, it should be used. And now, I mean, look at that. So you've got local detention facilities for juvenile offenders who this is pretrial stuff. And they're like, now turning them away, even in a domestic violence situation, which is unreal. Like you're going to send them back out and they just assaulted someone they live with. That's wild. And then, of course, even if they are convicted, our 2 juvenile prisons in the state aren't accepting new bookings. New inmates. And so it's like, well, what do you do? And then you have these judges, like the judge in Seattle we talked about last week, who every time it's a juvenile offender, even if they've committed the most violent crime or dangerous crime, or they're a clear and present threat to the community, it's like, oh, go home on electronic home monitoring, or, oh, $10,000 bail or something ridiculous like that. And, again, nobody is saying, and I haven't heard one police chief, sheriff, anything say that we need to, in every instance of juvenile crime, be throwing the book at these kids and they need to serve adult-sized sentences and all this stuff. I think everybody recognizes that when you're young, that's the time to try to get someone on a better path. And the goal is always to reduce recidivism. But when you have, if it's a freaking 17-year-old and they've just murdered someone, that's the same exact outcome as if a 25 or 30-year-old murders someone. They pose the same potential risk to the community. They clearly have a disdain or a lack of care for human life. So you're not doing, the fundamental responsibility of the justice system is supposed to be to serve justice, but also to make sure that the law-abiding are protected from those who are not abiding by the laws. There was a story, I don't have it to show you, but I was just reading it yesterday. Our friend Jason Rance had put it out. So, you know, the story out of Falls City where this kid killed his entire family except for one of his sisters who survived, allegedly. But I mean, she said he did it, and he's like the only one who's like uninjured, right? Or wasn't killed, besides his sister. And the judge in that case ordered the media not to name the suspect. Not to name this. Now, it's very different, typically, very typical for a juvenile suspect that we're ordered in court not to show their face. So you can basically film them from the waist down. I have never in 15 years heard of this, of a judge ordering the media not to name a suspect. First of all, the judge can't do that. That's unconstitutional. It's completely unenforceable. But it just shows, you know, these judges have gotten away with so many things that they just feel emboldened to like do whatever they can to protect violent criminals. I mean, this kid killed his entire family, except for one sister who thankfully survived. If that's not an adult-sized crime, I don't know what is. And you don't believe the public has a right to know his name, and you think the public's dumb enough not to find out his name? I mean, his name's already been reported out there, and he's a member of the family of all the people who were killed. So it's not like people aren't going to know who he is. So it's just an insane decision. Makes no sense under any circumstance, even if it's a juvenile offender. I don't know what it's going to take for people to wake up from this like kumbaya, all juveniles can be saved, or all juvenile crime is not serious just because of their age. It's really wild stuff. So we are going to have the chief, Chief Pete Fisher of the Fife Police Department on the show tomorrow to talk a little bit more about this, and specifically any legislative fixes maybe that need to happen to rectify this situation, which is tough because, again, a lot of these bad decisions are being made by judges. And so, you know, judges are supposed to be a separate branch of government, and there's not a ton you can do to legislate judges. There's some things, but it's really about, I mean, you've got, frankly, like 12 years of Inslee appointees on the bench who are easily able to run for re-election, who aren't challenged. That's going to take a long time to undo if voters ever want to undo it. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk a little follow-up to a story we did last week that I thought was just fascinating about this lawsuit accusing the city of Seattle of regulatory taking, basically of putting so many regulatory burdens on housing providers that it's akin to them just taking the person's private property for their own use. First, if you're thinking about selling your home, maybe you're a landlord who's like, I've had enough of this, and you're going to sell your rental unit, reach out to our friend Wes Jones, because he also knows what you're going through, because he has been a landlord as well and knows how difficult it is to navigate this environment that we're in. But Wes Jones and his team, the service they offer is just exceptional. That's what Mike Boggs found out, retired Seattle police officer who went to sell his home after 30 years.
So the concerns were, is it presentable enough to sell quickly to get the price we want? Wes came out and met with us, and we told him what our concerns were. And he mentioned the concierge service, and we did take advantage of it. It was such an easy process. Wes is a really great guy, and his team is amazing, and the communication is great. So the whole process was great.
Yeah, and so he was able to sell his home pretty quick and now retired in sunny Arizona. Wouldn't that be nice? Man, it's been dreary and depressing here. Not to mention he's not at Seattle PD anymore, so I have to imagine that's an extra bonus. Anyway, if you're thinking about selling your home, reach out to our friend Wes Jones, sellwithwes.com. Start by using their home value calculator to see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, so we talked about this lawsuit that was filed last week by a low-income housing provider. It's a building called the Addison. It's on 4th Avenue in Seattle. And they're going under. I mean, they aren't, the amount of people in the building paying rent is dropping at a rapid pace. The building and the units are being absolutely trashed. They are having a hard time evicting anyone. The regulations the city of Seattle have put down have made it difficult to properly screen tenants to make sure you're getting responsible tenants in the building. And so the owner of this building had enough, and they decided to sue the city of Seattle. I mean, I think this could have a huge implication, not only across our state, but maybe even other states that have some of these burdensome regulations. They decided to sue the city of Seattle for regulatory taking of private property, saying like, you're essentially put so many regulations on us that it's like the city of Seattle owns this building and is using it for its own purposes. And meanwhile, they are like totally underwater financially. They're not even making enough to cover their operating costs, et cetera. So that story came out. And one of the things that I was curious about at the time is how the media would cover it and if they'd be able to cover it fairly, because they always vilify the landlord side of things, like big greedy landlord, except in this case, it's a low income housing provider who by design, the goal is not to make a bunch of money. It's basically to make the money you need to cover operating costs. So I asked Sean Flynn with the Rental Housing Association to come back on today to do a follow-up, but also I had to ask him about a crime story that popped up. So here he is. Sean Flynn, welcome back to Undivided.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, there's a weird crime story I want to ask you about it's a horrible crime story involving a landlord and a tenant. But first, people were just fascinated by this lawsuit from last week on the, regulatory taking of property. What's the reaction been to that suit?
Oh, we've had here at RHA, we've had a lot of folks reaching out in support of that lawsuit from one of our members and asking how they can get involved, and lots of folks asking legal questions about whether this could lead to a class action suit. But the member who brought the lawsuit, GRE Downtowner, is not the only one suffering from these onerous and regulations that are putting them out of business and forcing them to house folks who are not paying and, for the public good. So they're not the only ones who are suffering from this. And we, again, commend them for having the courage to say it out loud and say that the city is responsible per the Constitution.
Yeah, and I kind of knew that would happen. I'm sure you anticipated it too, because we had said, could this lead to other lawsuits? Because they're not the only building that is dealing with, these regulations. And I would argue not even just low income buildings, but like in general, landlords big and small, and these burdensome regulations and what it means for their bottom line. Has the city responded at all in a formal way?
Not that I'm aware of. I think that from the articles I've read, not shockingly, the city's not going to comment on ongoing litigation. The city will answer the complaint, but they have some time to do that. So I've not heard much from the city at all, but that's not to, I don't think we can read anything into that one way or the other than they're going through the legal process.
Yeah. So one of the things we had mentioned the day this lawsuit dropped, because you guys had a press conference, there was media there, and I kind of thought, well, how are they going to spin this one? Like, are they going to, because they can't really say like big landlord bad because it's a low income housing provider. So generally speaking, I know you read and watched the media coverage on this. Did you think it was fair?
I think overall it was fair. I think that every news agency and publication has its slant, right? But I think that the facts are so compelling on this one. It's very difficult to draw any conclusion other than these regulations have forced this building in particular into massive loss situations, and that this building and the folks that put the deal together and the financing and all, it's very complex. It was a very complex deal. They set out with the best intentions to provide low-income housing to folks who need it, and that these overly burdensome regulations are directly impacting their ability to do that. So I think that the media coverage overall in our state leans much like the state, a little left. I think it's difficult to paint the housing provider in a negative light because it's just not there in this one.
Well, yeah, and we went through, I think we spent, half hour on the first half hour of our show on this, and going through in detail everything they put in the complaint about the timeline and the laws and the impact to their business and all these things. And it really is quite compelling. And I'm sure people will bring up, oh, some of that's COVID or whatever, but I don't see how you can dismiss all of it. Yeah, it's interesting. So we'll obviously be tracking that. Can I ask you about crime story. I know it's kind of weird for this segment, but I'm assuming you've seen this Como News article about the woman who was accused of murdering her landlord in White Center.
Yeah, yeah, it's tragic. We've got to have a better way to deal with non-payment issues. And I'm not going to say that this was directly linked to that because I just don't know. But I will say for those of us in the industry, our eyebrows are raised and think, man, this is a symptom of a larger problem.
Yeah, the suspect, the 19-year-old tenant, and the landlord was in her 70s. She was 73 years old. And, again, I don't know if there's a mental health issue at play or whatever it is. It seems like anyone who decides to settle a dispute over rent by stabbing an elderly woman to death has got to have something going on. But the suspect's brother told detectives that she'd been making threats to kill the landlord since last month, quote, if she asked her again about paying rent.
Yeah, well, and I think that this, brings me to a bill that we've run several years in a row that would allow for electronic notification of certain notices you've got to provide to tenants to reduce the conflict, at least putting people in those situations. And because there's a lot of notices you've got to personally serve through the unlawful detainer process, and moving some of those to a electronic process would seem safer. We haven't had a lot of traction on that, but I think as things get more and more heated in the landlord-tenant context, keeping things civil and parties separated might be the best course of action.
That's interesting. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you do an eviction, for instance, the cops are coming to do that. And so, because you understand that there might be like sometimes you got the sheriff's deputies who go and they'll make sure the eviction's carried out because that's a really tense situation. Like you're removing someone because they haven't paid rent or whatever it is. So that makes a lot of sense. I wasn't aware of some of those policies. So, all right, Sean, weird stuff, but I just had to ask you about it since I saw it. So thank you so much. And again, this regulatory taking thing, I think it has legs, and I'm hoping that it, brings enough scrutiny on this issue where maybe lawmakers don't get too carried away this session.
Yeah, no, and I think that if anyone's listening has had other experiences similar to the GRE downtown or facing problems, reach out to the Rental Housing Association. We're a great org to help get your message out and a great org to join in terms of getting resources and to help better run your rental business.
Amen. All right, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks so much. See you soon.
All right, Sean Flynn with RHA, and I really hope that more private landlords, big and small, who have been screwed over by these burdensome regulations, who are losing money, who've had, like Jaskaran Singh in Bellevue, had his house taken by a guy who's been living there for more than 2 years and hasn't paid rent. There ought to be a legal basis to be able to sue the government for that. And so the property rights issue is fascinating, and we're definitely going to talk more about it and follow that lawsuit to its conclusion. All right, you want my hint now? Okay, you have no choice because I'm running this show at the moment, and I've decided that I want to give you my hint. Okay, so Nicole, you don't know what I'm going to be. So here is my hint. It's a pawn piece. Okay, that is my hint. It's a picture hint. So I am something related to Washington politics that we've discussed on the show, and I am a pawn.
A pawn. Okay.
Pawn piece, yes.
I almost want to change my guess that I guessed yesterday.
Oh, you do? Okay, well, you can't. But yeah, lock in your guesses. If you get either Nicole or I's right, if you're a subscriber on Patreon, Locals, or X, so make sure you put it on there so we know you're a subscriber. And you have a correct guess, and you're one of the first 10, we'll give you a free piece of merch when we launch our new collection next year. You don't have to guess both of ours right, but you've got to guess one of them right. I will say, Nicole, I've been stewing on yours. Can we revisit yours again?
Oh, sure.
Someone making money hand over heart. Hand over heart. Wait a second.
Don't say
I won't
it
guess.
or
I won't
give
guess.
them tips.
I'm just reading it over.
Okay.
You already gave him that tip. I'm just reading it slowly.
Okay.
Okay, I'm thinking I have a guess now.
So you want to change yours on the pot too? We'll
No.
put in our second guesses
No, I sure
based
don't.
on
How
our...
obscure is your hint?
It's pretty obscure.
Yeah, mine is pretty obscure too.
Yeah.
It's not like necessarily
It's not
the
literal.
obvious guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. I have kind of a guess, I
Mostly
think.
not literal. Oh.
Okay. All right. So anyway, we're going to be dressed up for Halloween tomorrow, and you can get in your guesses
And if you're
as
dressed
to what our
up
costumes are.
dressed up at home tomorrow,
Yeah, watch the show dressed up.
send us some pictures. I wanna see
100%.
costumes.
100%. All right. Let's talk about the whiny crybabies at not Amazon this time, Starbucks in our segment Unbelievable. The entitlement crisis. The entitlement crisis is real. So we already talked about it at Amazon. Andy Jassy at Amazon said, hey, you got to come back to the office. And people were like enraged over it. And my whole thing is you have free will. It's not North Korea. If you don't want to work somewhere and you're mad you have to work at the office, then find work somewhere else. No one is forcing you to work for a company that you don't want to work for. I don't understand that. And especially now, there are so many, this is a job seekers market. And pay is good. And if you work for like a place like Amazon, you're going to have some very marketable skills. Just leave them for someone else, another tech company, pick one. Okay, so mynorthwest.com. Despite a CEO based in Cali, Starbucks employees need to be in the office 3 days a week come January. So the theme here, well, the CEO doesn't have to be in the office. The CEO lives in California. Why do we have to come to the office? Starbucks has informed its corporate employees that they can get fired if they do not come back to the office 3 days a week. According to reporting by Bloomberg, the company will introduce a standardized process starting in January to ensure compliance with this return to office policy. The move represents stricter enforcement of Starbucks' hybrid work policy, which has been in place for less than 2 months since Brian Niccol became CEO. Niccol previously mentioned that while employees should work wherever they are most productive, he believes that place is typically the office. The trouble is, the optics aren't the best regarding Niccol. His own work arrangement allows him to live in California and travel to Seattle on the company's corporate jet. Many employees signed a letter of protest at the time. I would have fired every employee who signed a letter of protest. Legit. Yep. Starbucks has stated that Niccol will spend most of his time in Seattle or visiting stores. Some employees have expressed that they do not mind where the CEO is based as long as he does not enforce strict in-office requirements. Very curious what you guys think about this one. But some of these headlines, I mean, get a grip. Let me see here. Starbucks tells workers to return to the office or risk getting fired. Starbucks says workers risk separation if they don't go into the office at least 3 days a week while its CEO commutes on a private company jet. Starbucks threatens to fire employees who don't come to the office. Just weeks after reportedly letting new CEO work from home, Starbucks tells Seattle HQ workers to return to the office or else. This one's my favorite. Bloomberg. Starbucks threatens to fire staff who don't come back to the office. Like, I get it that you could look at this in a very simple way and say, well, that the CEO isn't at the office, so how can you threaten to fire people who don't come to the office if the CEO isn't even coming to the office? He's the CEO. Work and try to become a CEO if you want to set the rules for who has to be in the office and who doesn't have to be in the office. And I would also say about all of this, had the pandemic never happened, you would have been working at the office for the last 4 years and you never would have experienced work from home. So like, because of the pandemic, like corporations have to absolutely upend how they do business, because even though the pandemic's over, you want to keep doing something that was only instituted because there was a global pandemic. It makes no sense to me, but I keep going back to, you really don't have to work there. And it's only 3 days a week. And I'm sorry, I'm sure the CEO is very busy, and I'm sure he has to be busy whether he's living in California or living in Seattle, because he's got to make sure the company is running. So yeah, I do think that there is ample evidence to show that for some types of jobs, especially ones that require collaboration, not being in the office and doing everything over Zooms is detrimental to work. So it's just, and even if it's not, you work for someone else. And that's their choice to make.
I just really can't even believe we're having this conversation.
It's so wild to me.
So ridiculous.
But every time we talk about this, we do have some subscribers who are like, well, I was, promised this and this. It's different to me if you were promised it. Mm-hmm. If you were hired and you were hired to be a work from home employee, and then all of a sudden the company switches it, that's their prerogative, but I do feel a little bit differently about that because you were sold kind of a bill of goods. Now, if you've been working there and you were just let work from home because of the pandemic and now you're mad you have to go back, that's just a temper tantrum. That's just a temper tantrum. But regardless, again, it's not North Korea. You have free will. Work there, don't work there, come back to the office or choose not to, and they're probably going to let you go. Same with Amazon. And could it be that this is the way they're trying to thin their workforce because the economy is kind of sluggish? Maybe, I guess. But again, that's their prerogative. I just don't get this,
everything has to be
fair.
Everything
has to be fair. Life's not fair. But that's what we've raised, right? Like this younger generation who's like, oh, everybody has to cater to my needs and my wants, and it's fair, and if they get to do it, I should be able to do it too. No, life's not fair. And that's a recipe for failure in life and in business and success and work if you believe that everything has to be fair to you all the time.
That is socialism, and it doesn't work.
It is just ridiculous. So I like that the companies are starting to do this. You get to make a choice. And hopefully, look, if people don't make that choice and they say, I'm not coming back to the office, I hope maybe there's a little bit of leeway that the company can give them a little time to find a new job or something. You know, you want to be a good employer. But at the end of the day, if they say you have to come back to the office to work here, guess what? You have to come back to the office.
Right. And if there's not enough people that want to work in the office, then maybe they'll have to change their rules in order to get enough employees or something like that. So
there is a give or take, because as a company, you have to have employees, right? You have to have employees, or especially as Starbucks, or you're not going to be able to function. So you can't do so much and put so many what you're deeming unfair requirements on other people before people start to quit. And then that's the free market, right? So if people start to quit because they don't like what you're doing as a company and how you're running your company, then ultimately that's just going to hurt you. That's going to hurt the business. So of course it's a balance. But you don't think they've thought about that? You don't think that the CEO of Starbucks has thought about, well, how many people might quit rather than coming back, and how will that impact our business? They've clearly thought about it, and they think that it's okay to go ahead and do it anyway. And hell, if more people quit than they thought and it hurts their business, then that's the free market. Then it hurts their business. Oh my God, the absolute entitlement of the workforce these days is unreal. Would you even want to work from home, Nicole?
You know what? It was fun for a while. I liked it for a while because you could, just wake up, and I worked in my pajamas half the day, and it was nice to be at home. I made lunch in my kitchen. That was nice. But I found myself every day after I got done with work, I would need to go shopping. I would need to go see people. I would need to get out of the house. I would need to. So I think it's good, and the social aspect of it, and getting to see people and interact with people and communicate effectively in front of people. I think that those are important traits that a lot of people don't have anymore. Yeah. And I think definitely there's a benefit to it for some companies that those things benefit.
It was lonely. And I think that's why I gained so much weight during the pandemic too, is you're not seeing people, you're not out doing things. And we were at home doing a newscast from home. I wasn't even getting dressed in my regular TV clothes most days. Top up. So I was in my pajama pants, not realizing that, I was getting bigger because the pajama pants just kept stretching. And then it's go back to put on my old dresses and heels. And I'm like, ooh, can't breathe, Yeah. So there's all these things, and it is a little bit lonely. But this show would not be what it is if you worked from home. No, it wouldn't. It would be almost impossible to do. Now, other people do it, right? It's a remote in, but it wouldn't even be close to what it is. So it's just, and I got this, I always get, Lieutenant Dan just commented, Brandi, in the world of software development, a lot of jobs are being outsourced to India. Just because they have the skills doesn't mean there are jobs available to fill. And I get that, but then you better do what your employer wants you to do. If you don't think that you can go out and find another job, then you just have to suck it up and go to work at Amazon 5 days a week, or whatever it is.
And they'd probably outsource, but some of the reason they're not outsourcing is because they see value in having people in front of them and in the office and all that. I think that, I just think that there's a lot to be said for in person and working your way up to. So I mean, these people complaining about not being the CEO, work your way up, and then you get to make the decision. But also, good luck working your way up when you don't pass people in the hallway on the way to the bathroom. Those are big moments.
Relationships.
Networking with people that you don't have meetings with every day on Zoom, networking in the office, figuring out other departments you might be interested in. Or I just think there's a lot of benefits. And my nieces, I think that, one is in an office now, or at a workplace. And I think it's done wonders for her, personal skills or personalization skills or communication skills, because they've all been at home learning for COVID, or they're just not communicating with each other anymore.
Kids need in person.
They need in person.
Young adults.
Young adults. Younger adults. it's an important part of working your way up in society and making this thing function.
Making you a better human being and more professional, and also good luck working yourself up the ladder if you're signing letters of protest that your CEO is flying a private jet and working from California. Like, yeah, I'm sorry, you're not going to be on the promotion list.
No.
I just want to read a couple comments on this now because there's so many strong opinions on this issue. Don says, there may be several employees that live far away who were working remotely and can't afford to move. There is that potential as well. But again, I know people who, I can't remember what company they worked for. Was it Nordstrom's maybe? Ended up remote work during the pandemic, decided to move to Chicago because they were working remotely and knew that there was the possibility that one day they might have to come back. And indeed, they were ordered to come back and they said, well, I'm living in Chicago. So they just quit their job and found a job in Chicago. So that's not the company's fault if you just assumed that you were going to be able to work remotely forever and you moved further away during the pandemic. Because I know a lot of people ended up doing that. Or in the tech sector, frankly, I've heard it from multiple people who work in the tech sector that they have multiple jobs now. That instead of, because they're not at their work every day being like sort of monitored or whatever it is. So now they've found that they're able to actually have multiple online jobs and they're bringing in multiple salaries and they don't want that to go away. But again, that was the choice you made, knowing very well that in most of these instances, you were never promised endless work from home. So you've got to do what you've got to do. But if you lose your job, I just don't understand the entitlement to it. You're not entitled to a job, right? All right, we're going to talk about this garbage controversy of Joe Biden's comments about people who support Donald Trump, which I guess is me now. Is it fair to say I support Donald Trump?
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah. I mean, you support his policies. You support some of the...
I support his policy, a lot of his policies. But like, just because I vote for him doesn't mean I'm like a supporter of Donald Trump. Like, I voted for him. He's the best choice. But like, people are like, oh, Brandi's a Trump supporter. It's like, I'm not fawning over the man. I'm voting for him because he has better policies.
Yourself.
I'm not distancing myself.
You are.
I'm just saying there's a difference between like I'm a supporter of Dave Reichert. Like, I'm not just voting for him because he's the option. Like, I am absolutely gung-ho, that's our guy.
Okay.
There's a difference there.
I get how you're making a difference. I don't think there really is a difference.
Okay. All right.
I get what you're doing there.
But
you're
anyway,
saying you're actively supporting.
fine.
So there's a difference between active and
Like,
non-active.
that's the only option that exists.
So you can
right.
put it. You can put an adjective or like maybe a verb.
I'm a reluctant voter, but here I am. I'm voting. I don't know if reluctance.
You love to vote. You're an
reluctant
voter
Trump
of Trump.
Reluctant Trump voter. But anyway, so Biden called us garbage. We'll talk about that coming up next. But anyway, y'all are trash. I've told you guys to take the First Mark Challenge because it's a no-brainer, especially if you're trying to save a little money as a family. You have to pay for your insurance. Why would you not have a professional that's been doing this locally for a long time look at your current insurance and see if they could save you money for free? You will never write a check to First Mark Insurance. That's the way an insurance broker works. And so they've been doing this. They'll go out, they'll shop the market for you, and they'll come back and give you their recommendations. They might recommend, like they did for Mike and I, that we move over to entirely new carriers. We were way underinsured, which was kind of scary to find out that everything we've worked hard for could have been at risk because we didn't pick the proper insurance on our own. I guess who knew? We needed a professional to actually help us navigate the insurance market, especially right now because they'll drop you like hot potato. Got it there. Thank you, Nicole.
You got it.
Like a hot potato.
I
prefer hot pancake. They'll drop you like hot pancake if you file even the smallest little claim. And then you're just like, what do I do now? Well, call First Mark Insurance. FirstMarkInsurance.com, FirstMarkInsurance.com. Schedule the First Mark Challenge today. We've had so many happy undivided viewers and listeners. I'm a member of the First Mark family. Nicole is, Daryl is, the business is. We don't get some sort of special rate from them for becoming a member of the First Mark family. It's not some sort of obligation because they do advertising with us. We just really like the service they provide. So FirstMarkInsurance.com, FirstMarkInsurance.com. They work for you. Okay, so kind of weird. Kamala Harris gave her like last pitch, I guess, to voters. Fine. But Biden almost simultaneously to that was talking and, bringing up what the comedian said at Donald Trump's Madison Square Garden rally about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage. And then he took his own shot on supporters of the former president.
Oh, the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done.
Yeah, the only garbage floating out there are his supporters. Great. What do we got now? Deplorables. There was irredeemables. Yeah, deplorables, irredeemables, garbage. Like, is he trying to sabotage Kamala's campaign at this point? Like, why would that be your closing message for Kamala Harris days before the election, is to vilify roughly half of the voting population in the country? But Kamala Harris tried to distance herself from what her own president said there about the garbage comment.
Let me be clear. I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm glad she did that because, I mean, you know, when you are the vice president to a president, he says something, it's very rare for a vice president to say they don't agree with it, but she kind of has no choice because she's running to be president and there's just days left. So this actually came to Donald Trump. He was on the stage in North Carolina. And Marco Rubio was there, and Marco Rubio was trying to deliver him the news like, oh, Biden just said this, and he gave him a slip of paper, and then Trump's reaction to it was really funny.
All right. Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but I have breaking news for you, Mr. President. You may not have heard this. Just moments ago, Joe Biden stated that our supporters are garbage. Are garbage. He's talking about the Border Patrol. He's talking about nurses. He's talking about teachers. He's talking about everyday Americans who love their country and want to dream big again and support you, Mr. President. And I hope their campaign is about to apologize for what Joe Biden just said. We are not garbage. We are patriots who love America. And thank you for running, Mr. President.
That's terrible. That's what it says. That's what it says. So you have, remember Hillary, she said deplorable, and then she said irredeemable, right? But she said deplorable, that didn't work out. Garbage, I think, is worse, right? But he doesn't know, you have to please forgive him. Please forgive him, for he not knoweth what he said.
He's funny. I just find the man funny now. How did I find him so unfunny for so long?
I'm so glad you find him funny now.
He is funny. Please forgive him, for he not knoweth what he says. That was in Pennsylvania. Sorry, not North Carolina. We're going to end the show with something he said in North Carolina that I thought was really good. But yeah, I mean, the garbage thing, it's like, so you rail on, so there's so many layers to this. So the whole Kill Tony joke at Madison Square Garden was stupid. It's also like, why would you do that? You need, the Puerto Rican voting base is important, especially in some swing states. And like, you're going to say that it's a pile of garbage. That just doesn't, it's a totally unforced error. But then the mainstream news went off like, oh, vile. CNN was saying, and MSNBC, that it was too like explicit to play. They wouldn't even play it back, like too offensive to play back. Too offensive to play back. Like, and that just that's just ridiculous, right? Yes. I mean, it is a tasteless joke for an election time. I mean, if he said it on stage, not an election thing, I think nobody would blink twice. But then at the same time, that happened at a rally where the media was calling them all Nazis and like comparing Trump, and when Harris was comparing Trump to Hitler. And she just said, can you play the Kamala Harris clip of her response to this really quick?
Let me be clear. I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for.
Yeah, but like, you're calling him Hitler. And then it's totally okay to call the Republicans Nazis and liken them to like, oh, 85 years ago, the Nazis held a rally here, so they're Nazis too. It's like this weird little like line of thought. But then there's an off-color joke about Puerto Ricans from a comedian, and that's like, oh, too offensive to even play. It's wild. It's just so predictable at this point. And I don't know if either of those things are really going to move the needle. I mean, again, for undecided voters, I don't think there's a lot of undecided voters left. Days away from the election, undecided between Trump and Harris. Give me a break. So I don't know that the Puerto Rican thing is going to sway. I don't know that the garbage thing is going to sway. But, you know, it's also, it's the sitting president. It takes on, one of them was a comedian who's known for off-color jokes. The other one is the sitting president of the United States who called half of the country, essentially, garbage. Like, independent of the election, that's insane. which again, we'll kind of touch on that in our closing sanity check. Okay, we're going to get to what I'm sure are some fantastic comments. Any good guesses yet on our costumes?
Well, there was a couple guesses on mine. I guess I shouldn't say if they're
we won't say if they're right or wrong today.
right or wrong.
Okay, we won't read
They
those
might
in
be a little
comments.
too obvious though, so I'd keep guessing.
Okay. Oh, she says keep guessing, but your first guess is the one that counts. Not this 7 guesses thing.
Yeah, no.
Hey, 7 guesses. I'm not giving you 7 guesses. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not kidding. You only get 1, so think before you post it. All right, coming up on November 21st, 3:30 p.m., Zach Abraham and his team at Ballot Capital are having another one of their Know Your Risk live webinars. Totally free to attend. You can tune in, listen to it passively, or you can ask questions if you want. You can sign up right now, knowyourriskradio.com. Knowyourriskradio.com. Zach Abraham is the Chief Investment Officer at Bulwark Capital. At this free live webinar coming up again Thursday, November 21st. You can tune in for a full reveal of how they use their risk management strategy to adjust to a volatile world that could impact your retirement portfolio. Risk management is Bulwark's #1 focus. The webinar is also perfect. No obligation, by the way. It's just a way for you to get to know them and have all your questions answered. And it's a way to help you leave a little less anxious, because this will be a couple weeks after the election. Depending on the results, you might be very worried suddenly about your retirement portfolio. So they might be able to answer some questions about how the election results could impact your retirement portfolio. So sign up, knowyourriskradio.com, knowyourriskradio.com. Okay, questions, comments, etc., etc. Baron of Gray Matter, $5 super chat. Paper ballots, 1 day of voting, voter ID, no ballots after midnight of election day, national holiday to vote. If you can't take time to vote, too bad. You'd have to have some sort of, obviously, like special ballots for people who are overseas or something like that. I mean, they have that in in-person voting states,
right,
where there are exceptions to the only 1 day of voting. Greg O'Lake and I will say, I've grown a lot in the last few years, haven't I? Although somebody on the internet today was like, you used to be like such a good journalist, and what happened to you and all your struggles. And I was just like, you know what happened to me? I've been soaking in the left-wing insanity while watching the media completely ignore what's happening and act like nothing's wrong. And it has a way of really red pilling you. That's what happened. But you guys are starting to chip away at my love of, or my belief in, the mail-in voting system. I still like it. I like voting that way. I mean, I don't intend to abuse the system, and so I have no problem with it. But some of these things that have happened, we should try to see if Steve Hobbs will join us on Monday.
Okay.
I'm sure the answer is no, but they've been very responsive to us. But there's just so many issues, so I think it would be nice to run these concerns past him about the USPS chain of custody issue and all of that, and the ballot arsons and stuff. So we'll reach out to the Secretary of State. All right, Kenneth Rausch. Brandi, multiple ballots showing up in one mailbox makes a great argument for in-person voting, required identification, and a purge of the voter roll calls. Yeah, voter roll calls should be purged very, very regularly. I've told my personal story of having a family member who lived with me for a while, then moved out of state, registered to vote there. I got ballots for election after election after election. Had multiple attempts to get the ballots to stop coming, and they finally did.
I do think that this year the big conspiracy, which I hope it's not, but I think the big conspiracy is the people that are voting last minute, the last day or two, and then their ballots don't show up. They don't ever get counted. And how do you prove that you submitted a ballot before the cutoff? And so those people just won't have ballots
Do
counted.
we ever know what happened? Write this down too.
Okay.
Do we ever know what happened? Got it. Thank you. I say write it down because I forget everything the second it comes out of my mouth. Whatever happened to the ballots that weren't picked up from that USPS out-of-service mailbox in the primary election? Do they just not count? They must have not counted them.
Well, I'm not sure we can ask, but King County elections. But I'm guessing that maybe it wasn't enough to make a difference in the things in the totals.
But it could.
But if it would have been, then maybe they would have made an announcement.
Will you ask them? Because I'm very curious, because that is the exact situation that you don't have to ask them right now. It's okay.
I know,
I believe that you will.
Setting a reminder.
I forget about everything. But I just am reminded of when you were on Dory and he'd ask you to look into something and you'd be like, on it. And then you just like every time. On it.
What are you supposed to say? Got it.
Okay, I'll do that right now. Yeah. Because that's an interesting, because you don't know. Maybe they did put it in there late and then it just never. So I want to know what they would do, like in that circumstance, since we're seemingly having enough issues where it's a very relevant question now.
Okay.
On it. Matthew Cook, Brandi, your hair could be on a shampoo commercial. That's a compliment. Thank you.
I thought you needed that today.
Hi.
Just a compliment.
Oh,
you were a little
thank you.
sleepy this morning.
I am
Felt a
so
little
tired. So if I look tired, my husband's been hunting again. Jesus. And his normal work schedule is he goes to work at he wakes up 3 a.m. So the dogs have been conditioned to wake up at 3 a.m. and go to the bathroom. That's their, and then they get some bites, and then they go munch on some food and water, and then Lucky comes back to bed with me, and Mac just snoozes downstairs. So they're not going to get out of that. So now every freaking morning at 3 a.m. they're like, oh, and I try to ignore them as long as I can, but both of them have some cues where it's like, you let me out now or I will poop on the floor.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. And so I just have such a hard time getting back to bed after that. So if I've been tired, that's why. If I look tired. Deanna Sanderson, I'm guessing Lady Liberty will be the costume of choice for one, if not both of you. Okay.
That was before we gave the hint, so I just thought I'd throw that
Lady
in
Liberty
there.
would be a great costume, by the way. Yeah.
Nope.
No.
We're more
Local.
creative than that.
Creative,
You know, 'cause that's a costume.
Yeah. Jeremy Weber, I miss listening to you when I was in Washington State. Well, the good news is you can listen to me anywhere you want.
That's what I thought. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Why do you have to miss us?
I know, you don't have to miss us. Laura Madden says, giddy up, keep riding that high horse. You were right. I know, if I had been wrong, that would have been embarrassing, but I wasn't, and I knew I wasn't going to be. I could be a high horse for Halloween. I could have had a big neck tube and and then been a high horse.
And that clue, I think, still would have fit, right?
Pawn? Yeah,
Well, I mean, it's a horse.
No, the
Or I mean,
pawn
the
isn't
pawn's not a horse, but there's horses, right? I'm not a chess player, but isn't there horses?
Yes.
Are
yes,
they knights?
there are.
Are they knights?
There are knights on the end.
That's
yeah.
knight.
Yeah. Good. Let's stop with
Yeah.
this. This is good. Yeah, there's a little castle. Thanks. And then there's okay, good. All right. Megan White, I work independently as a real estate agent. There are times where I miss the synergy that comes with having coworkers around me. Yeah. Baron of Gray Matter, $2 super chat. Quit if you don't like it. GTFO.
I think that there are obvious pros and cons to both, and everybody just has to weigh them out. So you're always going to have pros to staying at home. Yeah, you don't spend gas money, you don't have to drive, less time, blah blah blah. You have to. It's a pro and con. It's which ways outweighs the other. So everybody throwing out the obvious stuff, we get it, but does your employer get more? And they're the ones making the decision.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Who knows?
Now, if you're Inslee or all these people saying that we need electric cars and to not drive gas and then tell everybody they need to drive to work, that's another story.
Yeah. But also a place like Amazon, how cool of a campus is that to work on? Why would you not want to go to work?
I know. And they're spoiled.
Totally spoiled.
I mean, at Microsoft, you get free food and drinks and there's just free stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's fine. All right. Matt Gilbert, $5 super chat. If someone calls you garbage, that just means you're someone's treasure. Yeah. I like a good antique. I like a good rummage, In fact, I got to go to I got to find a thrift store today to get one piece of my costume that I just can't get at home.
Oh, you gave another secret.
Why? Another thrift store? Well, you can get a lot of stuff at a thrift store. Kim from the Claw. Forgot to mention that I wrote both of you in for judges along with Ari and Jason. You're welcome. Confident that you all could do a better job than the current running unopposed judges that were on my ballot in King County. Yeah, that's the only time I encourage a write-in is when it's unopposed and you cannot bring yourself to fill in the freaking circle for it. You can leave it blank or write something fun in. Why not? We did that too I wrote for Gonzalez, one of the Supreme Court justices. I just circled the other one and I wrote, no. Absolutely not. All right, before we get to our closing sanity check, let's do one more run through of our hints for our Halloween costume, starting with Nicole's. All right, so again, first 10 subscribers on Patreon, Locals, or X who correctly guess before the end of the day today what Nicole or I's costume will be, you'll get a free piece of merch when we launch our new collection next year. Nicole, your hint is someone making money hand over heart. Someone making money hand over heart. Got it. Okay. And again, these are Washington politics related, something that's come up on the show. My costume, my hint is a pawn. A pawn piece. Nicole, that's not a knight. So the horse is the knight and the little castle's the rook.
Okay.
Okay. You got the bishop and the queen and the king.
Got it.
This is a pawn piece. Pawn, very specific. That's my hint. So get those guesses in. Make sure you post them to Patreon, Locals, or X so we know they're coming from a subscriber. And hopefully a couple of you are able to get it right. And we'll show up in costume tomorrow for the big reveal. Too fun. All right, with that, let's get to our closing sanity check, shall we? Another clip from former President Donald Trump. So it was in Pennsylvania where Trump found out that Biden had called his supporters garbage, but then he was also in North Carolina, obviously making the rounds in swing states, and I thought he had a much more thoughtful response to it there.
My response to Joe and Kamala is very simple. You can't lead America if you don't love Americans. You just and you can't be president if you hate the American people. And there's a lot of hatred there.
Yeah, and you definitely can't claim that you'll be a president for everyone, something Biden did. You can't claim you're going to be a governor for everyone if you speak like that about large swaths of the population that you're supposed to serve. So I think about that with Bob Ferguson, too, who has vilified Donald Trump in every way, shape, and form. And it has risen to the extent where it's vilifying the people who support Donald Trump, albeit there aren't as many of them in Washington state as other states, but they're still here. Like Jay Inslee, saying, comparing them to bioreactor facilities during the pandemic. Those are servants who aren't actually in the job to serve people. That has been your sanity check for today. Nicole.
Can I give you a couple more super chats here that just came in? There you go.
Hell yeah. Why not? Where are they? Bottom of the show sheet?
Yep.
I don't see them yet.
I can read one. Old
I see them. Okay, yeah.
You want to go ahead?
Old Sub Sailor, $5 super chat. Biden's trying to say something that he will be remembered for. It's a legacy move. Is that really what you want to be remembered for? Scully with a $20 super chat. Not loving the people hanging out at drop boxes. Dropped my primary ballot off at one where the people were offering to help people deposit their ballots. I deposited my own. How many people said yes? That's weird.
Oh, no, they do that.
But you went all that way. Why would you hand it to somebody to put it in there for you?
Well, so they're coming up to cars, so people don't have to get out of their car. They're like, do you want us to put it in the thing for you?
Nope. I'm going to do it myself. I came all this way. All right. That has been the show for today. Thank you so much. A special thank you to unDivided subscribers. Your support allows Nicole and I to do this really awesome, fun job. How cool is that? Grateful every single day. And so grateful, in fact, we'll continue to come into the office to do this job for the foreseeable future. We'll have our final live show of the week tomorrow, and then an episode of Sundays with subscribers. And then Sunday night, I'm going to have a special live Q&A with subscribers right ahead of the election. So it's a really good time to get your election-related questions in. So be on the lookout for that time and link coming out. All right, undividedpod.com to sign up to support the show. undividedpod.com. See you tomorrow.